This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny, and welcome into the Montana Outdoor Podcast Studio. So glad you chose to join us to explore more of Montana's great outdoors. I want to give a special welcome to our men and women of the United States Armed Forces that are deployed all across the world. We are honored that so many of you listen to this podcast. It's great that you join us here, and we hope that we bring a little bit of home back to you wherever you are. And thanks for protecting us all around the world. And, of course, thank you big time to our wonderful veterans who listen to this podcast as well, quite often. Thank you for your service to this great country. To everyone listening here, I do have a quick favor to ask of you. When you get a chance, please share this podcast to social media and with your family and friends, wherever you can. That does help us out a bunch. So please do that when you get a chance. Also, for those of you listening to the podcast, if you want to get the whole Montana Outdoor Podcast experience, check us out on YouTube. Then you can watch the podcast. You can find a link there to the podcast right there in the podcast description on the audio side. Also, if you can't figure out how the heck do I find a link to YouTube, no problem. Just email Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and I'll send that link to you. Now, today we're going to talk about Tiber Reservoir, which is in FWP Region 4, probably the most popular place you'd put a boat in and camp if you decided you want to do that would be Ruse Tiber Marina. Now, that is located about 90 miles north of Great Falls, or if you're up on the High Line, there on Highway 2, it would be a little less than 20 miles south of Chester, Montana, if you take Highway 223. Yeah, 223 is the one. We're going to talk to a great fisheries biologist, Vivian, and we'll learn about the fish that are swimming around there in the reservoir and try to solve the mystery of why the walleye that were caught just this last June in the Walleyes Unlimited Fishing Tournament were so huge. So many of you have asked about that. So let's bring in that biologist we're talking about, Vivian. Katie, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about Tiber. But before we get into talking about Tiber Reservoir, tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do with the FWP, all those good things.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat more about Tiber. So I'm the Shono area fisheries biologist for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, which means I manage the fisheries and the water bodies along the eastern Rocky Mountain front from south of Augusta up to Tiber.
Okay.
I've been in this position since 2019. And before then, I was a fisheries technician out of Great Falls for 3 years. So been up here for a bit. I'm from McCall, Idaho. I went to the University of Idaho where I received my bachelor's of science in fishery resources. And then I also received a bachelor of sciences in wildlife resources. I worked for Idaho Fish and Game for, I think, 7 years on various Chinook salmon projects and wildlife projects. And then I ended up in Montana because I did my graduate research project in Libby on the Kootenai River. And that research resulted in my PhD in natural resources from the University of Idaho.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Are you glad you got into wildlife biology? I assume you are. You've been doing it a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a very outdoorsy family. Grew up fishing with
Mm.
my dad. He was a park ranger for 30 years, so
Oh, wow.
kind of
Okay.
built in and just kind of always wanted to go and get paid to be outside.
There you go. Yeah. I just, in the last week's podcast, we had Dr. Chad Bishop and Dr. Andrew Whiteley from the University of Montana Wildlife Biology Department there, and had a great discussion. They kind of had similar backgrounds too. So I was telling them, dang, I wish I would have done that when I was younger because it sounds like just such a great job. Anyway, so let's talk a bit about Tiber. Maybe before we get into the actual fish in there, tell us a bit about Tiber and maybe a little history or any of the tidbits you know about the reservoir.
Sure. So Tiber is an impoundment of the Marias River. It's
Mhm.
managed by the Bureau of Reclamation, primarily for irrigation and also a bit for flood control. It was closed in 1956, and it formed Lake Elwell or Tiber Reservoir when they closed it. And so it's the second largest reservoir in Region 4, second to the Upper Missouri reservoirs. And I believe it's the seventh largest in the state, but I'm
Mhm.
not 100% sure on that. But it's up in the top 10. In total, it's about 14, almost 15,000 surface acres. So it is pretty large. It's pretty deep. Max depths are up to 140 feet deep. And in general, it's relatively cold, lower nutrient, and deep for our region. So that, those abiotic factors do drive how our fisheries respond. It's something to keep in the back of our heads as we talk more about our fish and our fish growth rates is that it is a colder, low nutrient system.
Mhm. What do you mean by lower nutrient system?
Just lower phosphorus and nitrogen
Oh, okay.
compared to some of our more
Mhm.
mesotrophic systems. I mean, it is classified as slightly oligotrophic, mesotrophic, but it just lower nutrient in general based on the water source and how those nutrients move through the ecosystem, and so that then drives all of our food webs from there.
Mhm. Well, it's a fun reservoir. I enjoy fishing there. I haven't fished there lately, but certainly enjoy it a great deal. And of course, as I said, it's been in the news quite a bit. So, of course, one of the main things our audience wants to talk about and hear about are what's swimming around there in Tiber. What are the different species that can be found there in Tiber Reservoir?
So Tiber is managed as a multi-species fishery. So our primary game fish species are walleye, northern pike, yellow perch, but we also have lake trout, rainbow trout, Cisco, and burbot within their target. And then,
Mm-hmm.
in general, it's actually a pretty diverse fishery because we also have a wide variety of non-game fish. In total, there are 22 different fish species in Tiber.
Oh, really? I didn't know there was that many different species. Okay. So the other ones besides the normal game fish, what, just all different species of forage fish kind of stuff then?
Yeah, wide variety of those non-game fish species. So various sucker species, various minnow species. Um,
Hmm.
pretty diverse basin when you look at the Marias as a whole.
Okay. Now, as far as the sport fish, what would you say is the most popular that are targeted by anglers? I assume I'm going to take a stab. It's probably walleye, but I don't know that for certain.
Yeah, so in general, walleye are our most targeted species by anglers, especially by those people who, put their campers up at Tiber and go up there every weekend, spend a lot of time on the reservoir. They're primarily targeting walleye. But
Mm-hmm.
that being said, Tiber catch rate can be pretty slow, and the reservoir can be pretty difficult for anglers to be successful in if they haven't spent a lot of time up there. And so we see quite a big proportion of our anglers be generalists and kind of happy picking up pike or perch or whatever they might get into.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you say there were Gerard in there? Because I'd heard there are Gerard trout in there.
Yeah, we did for about 6 years stock jarred rainbow trout
Mm-hmm.
in the reservoir. We unfortunately we've lost that brood stock source, so we no longer are stocking Gerard
Oh.
strain rainbows. That started last year. But we
Oh,
do
okay.
put some Eagle Lake strain rainbows in there as well. And
Okay.
that's just to create an additional angling opportunity for our anglers.
Mm-hmm.
When people are trolling with bottom bouncers, they can still pick up some nice rainbows. But there are still some Gerards swimming around out there. We do see them in our nets. But right now, I think the most recent larger rainbow that we saw in our vertical nets was like 23 or 24 inches.
Yeah.
So there's still like some nice 6-7 pound rainbows out there.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting fish. Some people love to target those, and of course, it's more popular where they're known. Now, do the Gerard there? Do they naturally produce, or do they have to be stocked?
They have to be stocked in Tiber, just
Okay.
because the spawning habitat going into the upper Marias is not suitable for
Yeah, that's
that
kind of what I
natural
thought.
reproduction for a trout
Mm-hmm.
until we get a little farther up. So it's a small stocking, 45,000 fish or so, which is pretty small for Tiber.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But all in all, we've talked, a video show that we do every Saturday morning. We get a regular report from Tiber, but we haven't really done like a deep dive like we're doing today with it. But so yeah, we get great reports. I agree with you. I think anglers that frequent Tiber more often probably have a little more success. Of course, things are changing with all the new sonar and stuff out there. We'll talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a bit about this recent tournament. It was June 13th and 14th. As I said before, the Great Falls chapter of Walleyes Unlimited held their annual tournament on Tiber. And folks have been talking about this ever since. It's really had a lot of people pretty excited. Now, you may recall last year, 2024, Dan Peterson of Lewistown and Lance, sorry, Lance, if I mess up your name, a Cressage of Bozeman, they had a total weight of 81.86 pounds, which back last year, that was high for Tiber. And we kind of looked at that as more of an outlier because the second place team was 30 pounds away from them at a more normal rate for what we usually see in tournaments there of 49 pounds, and then third place was 40 pounds. Now, if we look farther back, I did a little look at, what some of the other tournaments have produced. 2022, the winning weight was just a little under 60 pounds. 2015, 38 pounds. So that's kind of what we're used to seeing. Now, if you fast forward to this year, 2025, the winning weight was 143 pounds. Second place, 123, followed by 111, almost 112. So, yeah, folks got real excited because, they're fairly decently grouped in there and that. Now, as I mentioned, some of that might have to do with the new forward-facing sonar and side imaging and all that cool stuff. But it's still a big jump. So what are your thoughts on this, Katie? Do you think that we're seeing the walleye population kind of explode, or give us your thoughts on this result of this tournament?
Yeah, so I guess I'll say in general, I typically don't track the circuit. So it's hard for me to kind of compare this year to past years, but it was pretty hard to ignore because there were so many rumors about Tiber changing and being drastically different. Like, we got phone calls as well. And so what I want to preface to this conversation is that those fish that the anglers were catching during the tournament are old. So fish that are over 28 inches in Tiber are 12 years and up. They are old fish. So, in fact, we've aged fish that are 30 inches up to 17 years old. So, and that's tied back to Tiber being that lower nutrient, colder system, that those fish grow slow, they live longer lives, and they reach those good lengths. And so, first and foremost, those fish have been in that reservoir for some time. They didn't recently show up.
Yeah, and they are they're still there. That's a catch and release tournament, so fear not, folks. They're still around. And at one time, Tiber was the home of the state record walleye. That was an odd story. The guy had never really fished for walleye before, caught it from the shore sitting on a lawn chair. So who knows? So, yeah, so go ahead. What else? What were your netting surveys, things like that, showing you about the size of walleye typically in Tiber?
Well, before I get into our netting results, what I want to
Yeah, go ahead.
touch a little bit on is that, the question of why was this tournament maybe more successful or different than the more recent tournaments that have occurred out there. And there are a couple of things that were different about this year compared to the last 5 years. And the first one is that we worked with the tournament director to move the tournament from late July to early June. And that was due to concerns over barotrauma-related mortality, which I'm more than happy to continue to talk about. But with moving it from late July to early June, there's a couple additional factors to consider about what those fish are doing and how they're moving around in the system. With the tournament being a lot earlier, those fish, in early June, those fish are coming off the spawn, and so they're active and they're hungry. And right now, because of this ongoing drought that we've had for the past 4 years, Tiber has a pretty poor forage base. And so what we know about forage base and catch rates is that there's an inverse relationship there. So when there's a lot of food out in the system, catch rates are usually a little lower because you're competing with live fish to get the walleye attention. But when forage base is low and those fish are hungry, the catch rates typically are a little higher because it's easier to get their attention to actually get them to bite. So, those fish are coming off a spawn, they're hungry, they're active. And with it being in the spring, the water's colder and it's more turbid because of the spring plankton bloom. And so, and with runoff. And so the walleye are in shallower water. They're more targetable for longer parts of the day. They're not diving down deep later in the day. They're still kind of hitting those shorelines in that shallower water. And so, though we can't really pinpoint exactly why that weekend was so successful or different, I think my initial assumption was that it was really good timing. Those fish were hungry because of the forage base. They're targetable for a longer part of the day, and they were in pretty accessible habitat. So they're not going to be, in late July, we see a lot of those fish get, 60 feet or deeper. But in June, you can pick up fish in 15 feet pretty consistently. So those are some factors to think about when we talk about the differences between this 2025 tournament and, 2020 to 2024.
That makes sense. Yeah. Talk a bit more about, you say you changed the date of the tournament into June. What was the term you were saying that the reason why you changed it? What was that again?
So we have concern over barotrauma-related mortality. So barotrauma is when fish sustain internal and external injuries when there's rapid decompression up the air bladder. So when pulled from deeper water and they're rapidly pulled up, their air bladder expands because walleye, perch, burbot can't burp that air up, unlike others, like lake trout can burp that air up. But walleye can't. And so that's when you pull them up and they're bloated. You see maybe extended eyes. Those are all signs of barotrauma. And because this is a catch and release tournament, and some reports that we had over the last couple of years, we wanted to do a change to try to minimize any related mortality from pulling those fish up deeper. And so our recommendation as a state agency to reduce barotrauma and unintended hooking mortality of walleye and perch, burbot, crappie, and bass is to avoid fishing in water 30 feet or greater if you're planning to catch and release. And so, when we know in like late July, a lot of those fish are naturally going to be deeper than 30 feet, that's going to potentially increase how many people are targeting them at that depth. And that's why we wanted to encourage the tournament to move it to June.
Okay. That makes some sense now. On this barotrauma, which the term I always thought was, well, it's like the bends or something. Is there, let's say, just your average angler, not somebody in the tournament, hooks one pretty deep. Is there a way to avoid that when you're bringing a fish up?
Unfortunately, there's not a great way. You can, if you do happen to pull a fish up and exhibiting signs of barotrauma, you can use a descending device to send it back down to that deep water again to hopefully be able to recompress, to get it under that certain pressure rate where it could survive. So you can try to do that, but that technique is not always successful. You need to have that device with you and be able to use it properly. And so, that is something you can do, but generally our recommendation is that if you're planning to catch and release, to just not fish deeper than 30 feet. Now, if you're planning to harvest fish, you can fish however you want. But that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And so we do have a barotrauma recommendation page on our website, I believe, or if people are interested, I'm happy to send it to them. But it just kind of gives some advice of what to consider to try to reduce unintended booking mortality, unintended barotrauma mortality.
I'll look that up, and in the podcast description, of course, we always put what this podcast is about, ways to contact folks on the podcast and that, but I will also put a link to that so people can take a look at it. Because one of the things I've heard, now, this is when I first was learning about fishing and that in Flathead Lake, and that's a very deep lake in that. And my mom always told me, well, you just have to bring them up real slow. Does that work?
It doesn't. Unfortunately, it's
sorry,
just
Mom.
It's such a, it would take quite a bit of time because they can't burp that air out because there's no connection between their swim bladder and their esophagus. They have to let the gases diffuse through their blood.
That would take. Yeah, you'd have to be real slow. I don't know many anglers that are that patient to bring a big fish up. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, see, gang, I told you, I thought we might solve this mystery, and maybe we have. I mean, that isn't for sure, but that does make a lot of sense. Katie, we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to maybe zero in a little more on the food source and that for walleye and that. So let's do that. But first, I want to give a chance for our folks who've been a wonderful sponsor of ours. And that are the great folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer who just have wonderful stuff. So anyway, take a listen to this. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Truth is, the Montana Outdoor Podcast wouldn't exist without their incredible support. And if you've been enjoying these episodes each week, maybe it's time to support the folks who help make it happen. So here's the question. Do you need a trailer for work, for hauling gear to your next adventure? Or maybe a new truck bed to help keep your life organized, whether it's for work or play? Well then, go see the folks who already get what you're about. You see, if you listen to this show, you've already got something in common with Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Like you, they love the outdoors. They work hard, and they're dang good at what they do. Their job? Helping people like you get your work done faster so you can get back out in Montana's great outdoors. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer carries a full lineup of Diamond Sea trailers, gooseneck, equipment, dub trailers, well, you name it. Whether you're hauling a few supplies or towing the big stuff, Diamond Sea trailers are built to handle it all with reliability and ease. They also carry CM truck beds, the strongest, most durable truck beds around. Plus, they service everything they sell. Need your trailer rewired so the lights work the way they're supposed to? They'll take care of that too. Got a new truck? They'll get you set up with the accessories you need, installed and ready to roll. And don't wait until the last minute to schedule your trailer service. Do that ahead of time so your gear's ready to go when you are. They also stock a huge selection of parts for Boss snowplows, CM truck beds, and Diamond Sea trailers. And if it's not in stock, they'll find it. Need financing? Well, they've got you covered there, too. Need a gooseneck or fifth wheel hitch for that rodeo trip or family outing to the great outdoors? Yep, they install those, too. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula at 5680 Expressway. You can call them at 406-549-4243 or check them out online at rmtte.com. That's Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, rmtte.com. Now let's get back to what Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer helped create, the podcast. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. And with us today, Katie Vivian, and she is a wildlife biologist, a fisheries biologist here at the FWP, and we're talking about Tiber Reservoir. Katie, we talked a little bit about some of the forage fish and that in Tiber for the walleye, because one of the things, you know, I got so many emails and stuff from people after that tournament, and one of the things is, well, if you could get biologists on, ask them, have you seen a big increase in Cisco? Because Cisco, in fact, I did a podcast a while back about how the Cisco has made such a huge difference in Fort Peck Reservoir, and with the salmon there, the big king salmon in there, and now we're seeing walleye tending to move away from those shorelines and target these huge pods of Cisco. And the guy wrote an article called The Bacon Double Cheeseburger of Fish, and that's what he referred to as Cisco of being. So answer that. One, have you seen an increase in Cisco population there? And is that something walleye have been targeting in Tiber?
So we haven't seen, I would say, like a net increase of Cisco. After they established in the reservoir, we see highs and lows based on like good recruitment years. But we haven't seen, I would say, a complete change in the overall population trend. So we consistently have Cisco present in our system. But we do have these boom and bust years where we have really incredible recruitment and survival. And that's tied to good reservoir conditions and high spring elevations. So we can have some really large cohorts come through. The most recent one was 2018 when we had a really high reservoir, 2018, 2019, lots of submerged shorelines. And we saw not only our Cisco do great, but we also saw that was a really good year for our walleye and a lot of our other fish species. We have lots of water, lots of good recruitment and survival. And so, they are still present, but I wouldn't say that there's been a complete shift in how that population is.
But that is something that walleye are eating, right?
Cisco are an important food source for our larger walleye. Because the Cisco grows so quickly in Tiber, we see them primarily utilized by walleye that are 16 inches and up.
Okay.
Those Cisco grow really fast. 1-year-old Cisco can be 7 to 8 inches. A 2-year-old fish can be 10 to 11.
Wow.
So they grow really fast. But they may have improved the relative weights of our larger, older fish.
Okay.
But that being said, walleye do have a pretty diverse forage, pretty diverse diet. We see them use mayflies and yellow perch and our shiners and crayfish in varying percentages throughout different times of the year. So, but I will say the Cisco are a critical food source for our pike. It's not uncommon to find, a 23-inch pike with 2 10-inch Cisco inside of them.
Oh, yeah.
They're not quite as gape limited as those walleye, and Cisco routinely make up 50% or greater of their diet.
Wow, yeah, I could see where pike would, and we see that in Fort Peck too. But yeah, pike probably munch on those big time. What are the other food sources that you see? You talked about some of them for walleye. Is it kind of hard to predict what their main food source would be then? Just depends on the time of year and that sort of thing?
Time of year definitely matters. But that being said, yellow perch are a primary and preferred food source for walleye. And so because of that, we do our best to improve the perch population in Tiber. It's tough because we have such fluctuating reservoir conditions.
Yeah.
And we don't have great shoreline vegetation. And so we have starting in 2004, we implemented our Pine for Perch program where we put the Christmas tree out in the reservoir. Again, trying to do anything we can to increase the perch population because they are the preferred food base for a wide, like our entire walleye population as a whole. And, in general, Tiber is pretty forage limited. Again, tying back to those abiotic characteristics of the system.
Okay.
But they also use shiners. So we have spot-tail shiners, emerald shiners, white suckers, crayfish. They eat those small rainbows, juvenile carp, all make up part of their diet.
Okay. I don't know if you guys do a lot of creel surveys or talking to anglers about what they use. I've always looked at it, but again, I tend to love to talk a lot about fishing, but I'm not as good as like those tournament guys as far as what to use. But I've always kind of viewed Tiber more as a bottom bouncer kind of reservoir. So do you see most of the walleye on average being caught on bottom bouncers, or what do you see as the preferred way to target those fish?
Yeah, so we do have a creeler who works from Memorial Day to Labor Day. They do weekend surveys. And that's, what gear you're using, what specific gear you're using is not part of our question. We did ask, are you using lures or bait? But primarily people are using bottom bouncers, usually tipped with leeches or night crawlers. We see some people jig, but it seems that, pretty consistently, if you're on a boat and you're trying to cover distance in the system and find where those fish are hanging out, people are using those bottom bouncers most often.
Yeah. Now, why do night crawlers work so well? Because, it's not like fish can eat those on a normal basis, right?
Oh, that's a great question.
I've never understood
why that
it.
seems to be like the best bait, but it works. It works not only in Tiber, but when we look at our Francis creel as well, Lake Francis, like using bottom bouncers, tipped with ball, night crawler is also pretty successful.
Yeah. We do that a lot on Fort Peck too, and I know a lot of people are really big into the jigging. And of course, in this tournament, that was primarily what they were doing was jigging. And some of the guys that, if you look at some of the names on that tournament list, these are guys that consistently are in the top area of the walleye circuit there, and they're just great at jigging. What are your thoughts on this side imaging and forward-facing sonar, and that that's kind of become a big deal that we're hearing? In fact, I know when we talked to some of the folks at run the big tournament on Fort Peck, the Governor's Cup, they felt that has been a factor of why they're seeing lower participation in that tournament. They still have a lot. Last this year was 180 some anglers, or teams rather. So there's two people to a team. But what are you hearing? Do you feel that's a fair way of taking fish? It's kind of the genie's out of the bottle. I don't know how you put it back in, but what are your thoughts?
So we don't participate in serving tournament participants.
Right.
So we don't know how technology has changed within the tournament or at what rate. But what I can say is that for the last 2 years, we've added questions to our creel on Tiber and on Francis, just so we can better understand which percentage of anglers are using forward-facing sonar or advanced technology to kind of start tracking to see how this is changing over time. So that is something that we're just adding into we collect quite a bit of data on Tiber regularly. So that's just going to be a small piece of kind of what we're tracking. So I can't really speculate how those things are changing within the tournament, but what I can say is that, we do hear people's thoughts on how they'd like the tournament to change, how they'd like to see maybe different classes, and how that tie back into technology.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that if people feel that way, they definitely should reach out to tournament directors and encourage those changes. So the tournament directors are the ones who can set up, those types of changes to the tournament. That's not something that FWP would change within how we permit those tournaments. So
we hear, a lot of different things about it. Some people are just adamant that it shouldn't be allowed in tournaments. Other people go, hey, if you want to look at technology, it wasn't long ago there was no such thing as electric trolling motor. And it says on and on and on. I mean, we get down to one point you had to paddle. So where do we go with it? I'm kind of in the camp that I kind of like it for several reasons. One, from the things that I've heard, because you can really target fish, you end up actually catching less fish and throwing them back, because a lot of anglers can say, yeah, well, I can look at my forward-facing sonar and that and say that's a walleye. And, of course, that's what I'm targeting. So that's what I'm going to get. And so net, you have people just catching what they want to catch and not catching all these other species. And as we know, no matter how careful you are, over time, there's going to be some fish not make it after being caught. And so that's one school of thought. So I kind of like it. But the main reason I like it is we're seeing that is bringing more young people into fishing. Young people are brought up with a lot of technology, and it's kind of like a video game in a way. And so in talking to fishing guides, which I do a lot here on this podcast, they said, when we get a young person on, usually they're not in a great mood because mom or dad's made them come on the fishing trip. But when they see that, they get really interested. And the next thing you know, they're just, hey, this is really cool. So, and we have been seeing the number of young anglers not really going the way we want it to go. So that's kind of why I like it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if you have any.
I'd say that, that technology is going to continue to change, and evolve and become more dialed in. And, it's not something, I don't have forward-facing sonar on my boat, but that doesn't mean that I am against it or for it or anything like that. I would just say that, I know there are a lot of people concerned about how this is going to change populations, and maybe we need to look at harvest restrictions or things like that. And what I would say is that, regardless of how technology changes, your fishery biologists are still very closely tracking your population. We're tracking our harvest rates and our catch rates, and we are making sure that, these populations are going to stay sustainable. And we're looking at a lot of factors, not just how technology is changing, not just how our creel is. We look at a wide variety of things that impact our population. So
I'm really glad you brought that up. And we're going to take one more quick break. But when we come back, if you don't mind, I'd like you to talk a bit about how you do that, and that, because some people, and I'm not saying everybody thinks this way, but some people, and I get into these discussions a lot where they say, well, they have one way of doing it, and so, what works for one reservoir doesn't. And I always get in these arguments of, no, I talk to a lot of biologists, and they're very in tune with what's going on with their area and what they're looking for, and those limits are set for a reason. So when we come back, let's talk a bit about that. They say they don't make them like they used to, but at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, that's kind of the whole point. This isn't just a lumber yard. We're talking about 11 acres of reclaimed wood. Wall paneling, flooring, trim, beams, slabs, you name it. Every single piece has a story behind it. Old barns, historic homesteads, long-forgotten factories. This wood has been places, and now it can be part of your story, too. Maybe you're building a home, remodeling a room, or just putting together that dream project you've had on the back burner. Superior Hardwoods of Montana can help bring it to life. They can even custom mill it to fit your exact vision, because real craftsmanship never goes out of style. And here's the thing. You're not just getting character and beauty when you choose reclaimed wood. You're reclaiming American history. You're giving something old a brand new chapter with values that never go out of style. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Whether you're a contractor, a weekend DIYer, or someone who just loves a one-of-a-kind piece of wood, Superior Hardwoods is open to the public and ready to help. Exotic woods, live-edge slabs, pre-finished and unfinished flooring, it's all in stock and ready to go. Need help picking out the right material? Just ask. Their team has been doing it since 1977, and they know how to guide you through the woods, literally and figuratively. Swing by their beautiful showroom at 5120 Highway 93 South in Missoula, or check them out online at superior-hardwoods.com. I promise you, you'll leave inspired. That's Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Local, knowledgeable, family-run, and ready to help you build something that lasts. Let them help guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Katie Vivian is my guest. We're talking about Tiber Reservoir, which, by the way, folks, if you haven't tried it, go check that reservoir out. One, you look at that last tournament, there is some big walleye in there. But two, it's just a neat place. And I always encourage people, don't get stuck in a rut when we have all these incredible waterways all around Montana and you get familiar with one and that's all you ever do. Get out and look at some of the other stuff. So, Katie, we're talking a bit about, how you guys keep tabs on the fish population in the various reservoirs. Talk a bit about that. It isn't this is the way we do it for all reservoirs, right? Each reservoir kind of has its own, or water body kind of has its own, fish personality, if you will. Talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. So first what I want to say is that I think I like to remind anglers that as area biologists, our goal is to make those reservoirs the best they can be, because they're also the reservoirs that we go recreate on ourselves.
Yeah.
Tiber is one of my favorite places to fish. And so my goal, much like lots of other biologists, is to make it the best it can possibly be. And so when we are managing these reservoirs as a whole, we're looking at our goals for the reservoir, how are we managing it? And then we make sure that we have the data that we need to answer those questions and track it appropriately. And when we look at Tiber specifically, it's pretty heavily monitored. We have monthly vertical gill netting that we complete from May to October, and that's to track our Cisco population, see how they're doing, see how they're changing throughout the water column. We have our week-long fall gill netting effort, which is what we use to track our adult fish population trends. We do a week-long of beach seining, which allows us to track trends in our juvenile and minnow populations. And then we also have our seasonal creeler, who works for Memorial Day and Labor Day. So all of that data that we collect every year, in addition to monitoring how the reservoir elevations are changing and the water patterns are, we do limnological sampling every month as well. So we look at temperature through the water column and turbidity and our zooplankton. So we collect all of this data and we just kind of track it over time to see how things are changing. And that allows us to adjust things that we might be concerned about or ask additional questions. So it's pretty heavily monitored as a reservoir. And, we worked a couple of years ago, we did want to be more transparent. I wanted to be more transparent on when we talk with anglers about whether the system is doing well or if it's doing poorly. Because, I could go to anglers and say, I think things are going well. And people be like, that's not what I think. I think it should be much better. And so as part of our statewide fisheries management plan, we actually worked on creating metrics, goal ranges, to be more transparent and clear about whether the system is meeting its goals or whether it's not. So our statewide fisheries management plan is an incredible document. I don't know if people have looked at it, but it has all of our managed fisheries within the state. Yeah. It talks about what we manage for and why. And in Tiber, we set for our walleye population, we set goals for relative abundances. We set a goal for proportional stock density, so how balanced the population is, and we set a goal for a relative weight. So when I meet with my angling groups, I can say, we're meeting the goal here, we're meeting the goal here, we're not meeting it here. This is what I think we could do to try to improve it. And so we've been working on that to try to be more transparent on what the system is doing and what we are going to try to do to fix it or improve it.
And I'm glad you talked about that, because to me, that's important. And what I'll do is I'll put a link to that statewide fisheries plan, the management plan. So folks can take a look at it. It is very detailed, but it's worth looking at. I'm kind of an info geek, so I kind of like that stuff. But do take a look at it, or at least look at the water body that you're most interested in, and learn about that. I'm not going to keep you much longer because I know you are busier than heck. But before we go, I wanted to ask you about a few other things. One is, back in 2016, there was invasive mussels detected in Tiber. Now, if I'm correct, that reservoir has had a clean bill of health since. Is there any kind of special things that need to be done? I know for a while there was a decontamination process if you weren't a regular boater on that. So what kind of things are still required or not?
Sure, yeah. So Tiber is inspected annually by our FWP, Aquatic Invasive Species Specialists. And since that initial discoveries, we haven't had any more positive detections for mussels, which is
great.
Fantastic. So
Yeah.
we went through a quarantine period, and I think it was 5 years. And since then, we met that. We no longer have mandatory decontamination stations when leaving Tiber, which is great.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that being said, even though we don't have that mandatory rule anymore, we still ask all anglers and boaters, regardless of where you're going, still clean, drain, dry all your equipment. And we want to just make sure that we protect Montana waters, and to make sure that, when you are traveling, that you are stopping at all those inspection stations, and just follow good protocol to keep all of our waters safe. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now for Tiber.
Just follow those rules, folks, because if you want to see what will end up, just go read about some of the water bodies in other states that have the invasive species have got into. It's a disaster, and it's so sad because it'll wipe some species out just because it makes the water actually too clear, from what I understand. So it's just, let's not have that happen here. Are there any new plans at all for Tiber in the future? Any things that you might want to tell us about, or changes in the way they're going to do water levels or stocking or any of that kind of stuff?
Sure. So the main thing that we are focused on right now with Tiber is working with BOR and the Army Corps to improve reservoir elevations. So the last 4 years with the drought and some changing water management, we've really seen Tiber be low, and that impacts not only our fisheries, but also it's impacting angler access. So we do expect, with how low Tiber is right now, that anglers will probably lose access to the upper part reservoir boat ramps relatively soon if they haven't already.
Yeah.
And so we're working with BOR and Army Corps to hopefully have a higher winter elevation goal, which would benefit our spring spawning fish and improve shoreline stability and vegetation. So right now, our focus is really on trying to improve habitat within Tiber. Like we talked at the very beginning, we want to really try to address those abiotic factors that drive the ecosystem as a whole. So that's our goal right now.
Mm-hmm. So no plans on putting any new species in there or anything like that, huh?
No new plans to put new species in there. We introduced Cisco. We did see a shift in how Cisco are an incredible planktivore. They did kind of change our bottom of our food web. They did alter our zooplankton. And so we want to make sure that the system remains stable and that we don't see any other impacts to our juvenile fish.
Good. Okay. Well, that's going to pretty much wrap it up. One of the things I did want to ask you, as a biologist, of course, you spend a lot of time on Tiber. What do you think stands out about that reservoir? In other words, is there anything that where you go, now, yep, that is what is unique about Tiber? What would you say that might be?
That's a great question. I think Tiber is it is one of my favorite places to go on the weekends, and that ties back to just the unique geology of the system. I think the Marias Drainage as a whole is incredible, and being able to get up there, have all those unique fingers and shorelines, are so different than a lot of our other reservoirs. That topography is just, it's really beautiful, I think.
Yeah.
So I like going up there for that. I also think that Tiber is a fun system from, it's stable. It's a relatively stable system. When we look at our netting numbers, the walleye are pretty consistent. We don't see big swings one way or the other. And the fact that you can go out there and have a good day catching fish, or you could go out there and not catch anything, but still get to see some unique fish and wildlife is a good time. And it does have that, if you get to learn the system, it does have that trophy component for walleye and pike if you spend the time up there.
Mhm. Not to mention, the marina has some really good ice cream.
Yeah.
That can always soothe any problems if you didn't catch anything. Lastly, is there any things that you want us to know or anything you want to add before I let you go?
Oh, the one thing I would say is that we know that, and I want to just hit this hard on all of my reservoirs that I mentioned, that water is driving fish populations right now in our area. Tiber is going on 4 years of drought. Though the population is pretty stable right now, we do expect that relative abundances will probably decline over the next couple of years because we're seeing lower numbers of young fish come up. And that's tied back to that water component and the less available food, sort of seeing not as strong recruitment in general. And so that is something we're tracking. Again, we're trying to focus on the root cause, which is the drought and the water conditions. And that's the case for Tiber. It's also the case for Francis, Willow Creek, Nylon, all the places along the Eastern Rocky Mountain front that have been impacted by the severe drought for the last couple of years.
Makes a lot of sense to me, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy. You got a lot of stuff that you have to do. I hope that now that you've seen this is fairly painless, hopefully, you'll come back and we can talk about some of the other water bodies that you manage. I always say, if you just relax, it's kind of like going to the dentist when you get on a podcast with me. There's some mild discomfort and then a numbing sensation.
Well, I'm always happy to chat. And I would say, I love talking with anglers. I try to get back to people within 2 days. So if people have questions, they want to talk more, just give me a call. I'm always happy to chat through some things.
I was going to post your email in there. Is that okay, Katie?
Yeah, and I can give you my cell phone and my office phone as well.
Oh, okay. Well, send me those too. That would be great. Because I know folks, I always encourage people, before you start getting criticized, just call. The biologists are happy to share with why they do what they do. Yeah. Okay, Katie. Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for all the fantastic information. And I think we may have solved this mystery about the tournament. That was really interesting what you brought up. So you take care and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
And there you have it. That is Katie Vivian from the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks talking about Tiber. And that was some cool stuff, folks. So now it's your turn. Send me your emails. Manny's going to give you my email in a second. And just, hey, tell me what you think, any questions you have, and also get back to Katie and let her know too. So until we talk again, folks, be safe out there, be good to each other, and we'll see you soon on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.